First item, 3 secrets. The first secret I want to share with you is about his confidence. You know, the number one rule of being male is don't appear weak. Now, every guy knows that he is weak, but he has to act like he's not weak. And so he carries around this secret that he knows he's not everything that he's putting himself out to be. In fact, he's incredibly unsure of himself. And this is on a guy's mind 90% of the time. But I got to tell you something else here. There are two kinds of men: one who feels insecure, and one who's really good at hiding his insecurity. The one who's really good at hiding his insecurity sometimes is so good at it that he's convinced himself that he's not insecure. But he's human. He is absolutely human. And we set such high standards for men in terms of the belief that they have this ability to be tough, indestructible, impenetrable, like a knight in a suit of armor, that we have these standards and every guy knows he doesn't meet that. So his confidence, his low level of confidence, is a big secret he tries to keep from everybody, including himself if he can. But not every guy can pull that off. Now, you don't want to go around and say, hey, I know you're not confident. Instead, you want to listen very carefully for indications that he's not confident and make sure that you don't push those buttons to make him feel worse about himself. I'm not talking about flattery and building him up and constantly telling him he's a wonderful man, because that won't work either. But just know that beneath that confident facade, the appearance that he's got it all together, is one dude that knows he doesn't. Okay? Big secret from men. The second secret is about a man's emotional life. I used to think that guys didn't feel anything. I used to think that they literally did not experience emotions. As I became, as a mom, I knew my boys experienced emotions. They were in front of me every single day. But it wasn't until I got into studying psychology and I realized that men experience every emotion that a woman does. They just don't have the freedom to express it like a woman does. That's a big difference. You know, when when you have a lot of emotions that you can't show to everybody because you'll be shamed, you'll be made fun of, you'll be seen as weak, it builds up over time and ends up being a very, very lonely life when you can't share your feelings with anybody. And we think sometimes it's just that they won't, but they actually, from a very young age, have been taught not to cry. You've heard that saying, big boys don't cry, don't be a mama's boy, you're such a baby. All of those things are very, very shaming. And a man will do anything he can to avoid that shame. We do that too as women. We don't want to be shamed. Who does? No one wants to have that happen. The difference, I think, between men and women when it comes to shame is that shaming is such a major part of the process of turning a boy into a man. And the major area he gets shamed for is his feelings, expressing his feelings. They don't go away. They still feel things very, very deeply. They just learn not to show it on their face, and they learn certainly not to say it in words. And this transformation actually takes place by the time he enters kindergarten, because the research shows that baby boys are actually way more sensitive than baby girls. Go figure. They cry more, they are harder to soothe, they're more reactive to their mom and her stress level, but they also coo and laugh more than a baby girl. But by the time they get to kindergarten, it's been shamed out of them. So when you want him to talk about his feelings and he won't do it, he's got really good reasons not to. And one of the ways that you can actually encourage him to talk is by becoming a better listener. That means when he starts sharing, you listen. And when he pauses, you keep listening. And you give him the impression that you care deeply about what he's saying, but don't say a word. So powerful. So incredibly powerful. Because men are still sensitive all the way to the grave. The other thing that I think is really puzzling about a man's emotional life is that they're sensitive to different things than women are. So what would make us cry doesn't faze him at all. We have different biology, we have different chemistry, we have different ways of attuning to tuning into our environment. And in that process, those things that make a girl cry don't make a boy cry. But the thing that will get to a boy or a man every time is something that attacks his identity as a man. And when that happens, he's hyper sensitive to that. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about his emotions and his emotional life. Why he won't tell you things. Why when you ask him what he's feeling, he won't say anything. Or he'll mumble one word or two words. So being involved in a joint activity that's side by side, if you learn to listen, he will tell you a lot about what's going on. And your job with that information, when he shares his vulnerability with you, is that you hold it in your heart and you pray about it for him. You know, you might touch his arm or smile or give a very short word or two, like it must be really hard, and then stop. If you do more than that, it begins to feel emasculating, which is a huge factor for men and their emotions, is not to feel like he's less of a man because he has emotions. Really important to remember that. Okay, the final part in this is about his relationships. He has a deep need for you. It's deeper than even he realizes, or I should say, it's deeper than he's willing to admit. I've talked to men who've said, I'd rather hang out with my buddies. They get who I am. And, I get my need for connection through my pals, the guys that I hang out with, that I go through life with. I've got to tell you that that is not the kind of emotional need I'm talking about. I'm talking about the deep connection that every man needs from a woman. Now, that sounds really profound, and I think it is. And the reason I think it's true is because when Adam was alone in the garden, God didn't say it's not good for the man to be alone. I'll make a bunch of other men. He didn't do that. He said, I'm going to make someone who is so close to Adam and yet so different that he can't resist her. And she's going to enrich his life in ways he can't even imagine. He needs you. That's a fact. It was actually in Genesis 2:18 when God said it's not good for man to be alone. And then farther on in the Bible, when Paul talks about it, in 2 Corinthians 11:9, he says, woman was created for man because he needed her. It wasn't the other way around. The man was not created for the woman because she needed him, because she wasn't the first one to be created. Man was. And he needed her. He needed what she could bring to his life that no animal in all of the garden could meet. Not even God himself. He needed a companion. He needed a someone just for himself, someone outside of himself that he could relate to, that he could fulfill his purposes for. And that's why we have Eve. Okay? So keep that in mind.